Jordan De Goey was absent from Collingwood headquarters as the preparations began for the most critical home and away round of the season, but he did cast quite a shadow yesterday. Senior teammates were harangued upon their arrival at the club as if they were the wrongdoers. Management spent the day in crisis meetings debating how to deal with its wayward superstar. The fact that continues hints at the tensions at play behind the scenes. By late evening, a puerile TikTok video had been uncovered and published, meaning that Jack Ginnivan and Isaac Quaynor now face a day of scrutiny, and Collingwood is dealing with two crises under the umbrella of a total lack of respect for women. That's the flow-on effect of De Goey's actions. The barley bender is the catalyst. The Magpies went to the break surging with momentum. 4 wins on the trot at the climax, a stirring victory over the reigning premiers. The finals becoming more than an aspiration, and the group was buoyant. Now it is a club mired in controversy and under siege, with live crosses every hour on the morning programs, and the Pitbulls are at the door. That's the impact of De Goey's indulgence. We have learnt through Mick Gleeson that negotiations between club and player were so advanced that a lucrative contract had been offered. The club needed to withdraw that once the Barley incident became public. I think part of that would be procedural and legal rather than a dramatic action that hints at the end. I would expect Collingwood will make an offer to De Goey in the not-too-distant future, and I suspect that it will be a little altered from what had been there over the weekend. It remains my view that he is Collingwood's asset, Collingwood's responsibility, and Collingwood's problem. And it's a high-stakes resolution that needs to be reached today to end the hemorrhaging. And it's not easy between boards, between football department, between the AFL, and between the player who thinks that he has done nothing wrong. So that's the Collingwood scenario. I glance up at the tally and see Collingwood in crisis and the live crosses out the front. That's the net effect. So I see that Grant Thomas thinks St Kilda should go all in for De Goey. It's grossly unfair that the Saints have been drawn into this so casually at the moment of maximum tension, but let's run the exercise. Run it with me. Gather the Saints leadership group. Jack Steele, heart and soul of the Saints, stand-up guy, thoroughly decent person. The captain. He's done a contract extension through to the end of 2027. So that's the long-term figurehead for this Saints group. He's likely on about $800,000 a year. The other 4 members of the group are Tim Membry, Dougal Howard, Callum Wilkie, and Jaron Geary, and they are on significantly less in terms of tenure and money. Outside the room, Brad Hill is the Saints' highest paid player, nudging $900,000. Max King will become that in time, but not across the span of his current 4-year deal. And Brad Crouch has been brought in on a 5-year deal in the mid to high 600s. Now make the case to the leadership group that the club is making a full-blown assault to lure De Goey out of Collingwood. A 5-year deal on between $900,000 and $1 million. More than anyone else on the list commands. And do it with a long-term picture of a player who doesn't live the standards or culture of a footy club he purports to love. If you win that group over, head to the boardroom, where the collective knowledge spans from Andrew Lover to Jake Carlisle to Dan Hannebery, and make the case in that room. Because to offer such a deal, you need the imprimatur of the board. De Goey is unrecruitable on such terms now. There's a difference between being free to a good home and commanding the best contract at a club. Do the latter and risk your culture being blown apart. That's desperation. And you live long enough to see the same story repeat. It's worth remembering what happened when the Lions went all in for Brendan Favola. Nathan Buckley, good morning.
G'day, Jared.
Whatever you say here is going to be interpreted differently from what is said elsewhere. Is that in your mind as we sit to chat?
Absolutely, yeah. And I can put a disclaimer at the front that I'm no longer involved at the football club. That I don't have intimate knowledge of their thoughts, of their conversations. But only 12 months ago I was in there, and for the best part of my life I've been part of this football club that's been scrutinised really heavily at the moment, and and relationships with the individuals that we're talking about. So it's a difficult position to be in. Just I will speak openly and I will give my opinion. But I really enjoyed the comments of Chris Scott and Ken Hinkley, and I think when we get in this situation as a media, it is not. We're not dealing with a normal, a normal run of the mill situation. We're not talking about football anymore. We're talking about standards and behaviours, and quite often they are different for different people. But we're putting young men through the ringer, and not through the ringer. We're putting them up to a standard that we expect them to sit on a pedestal and be role models across society. And when they step off that beaten path a little bit, we go really hard at them, and we go long. So now Isaac Quainer and Jack Ginnivan have been drawn into this. I don't know exactly what that TikTok trend is or where it stands, but right now it sits in the brand of misogyny, and it sits against the football club, and it is under siege as a result of that.
How does it have you feeling as a long-term Collingwood person who knows the individuals?
Right now, I'm really uncomfortable right now. I have to declare that, because I think in isolation, what Geordie did is not a hanging offence. But when you put it against his past, when you put it against the situation that the club was in a really positive space, and to make the decision to go to Bali was, when in retrospect, even at the time, it should have had red flags all over it. But in retrospect, it clearly was a bad decision. To try and defend yourself after the fact was a really bad decision, and it's created a situation that the club didn't need. And this is totally off the football field. It's out of the football department, and it's away from anything that Craig McRae can control, or he should be accountable for, or Graham Wright, or Jeremy Howe, or Scott Pendlebury, or Taylor Adams. This is separate of them. You can lead a horse to water, but it's up to the person to make the right decisions at the right times. A 26-year-old man with the support of the people that he chooses to listen to. It was a bad call, and I don't want to throw Geordie under the bus as such, but he needs to be accountable and responsible for the decisions he's made, and the fact that once you do that, make those decisions, you lose control. You lose control of the narrative. You've chosen to step away from where this is going to go, because now it's picked up and it's grown legs and it's out, and you haven't made the right decision that you should have made, and now you're accountable to wherever it goes from here.
So there's a lot of different layers to that. Let me do the football club. So you've lived a few of these days where the club is under siege. So when last we saw them, they were winning on the Queen's birthday. Plaudits,
amazing.
Sky's the limit.
And how positive was all of that?
Yep.
Rightly so.
For the coach, for the players, for the style, for the journey. They take their break, and they've won 4 in a row. This is the biggest home and away round of the season that's looming.
Yep. And
this is where Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday has been occupied. So how suboptimal is that as the coach of a football club?
Yeah. Oh, look, so I've dealt with it. There was the drug saga that from a Mark Robinson article leading into 2016 round 1. We got beaten by 80 points by Sydney. Dane Swan played his last game, broke his foot. Alex Solo landed on his head, nearly broke his neck. That was a bad night, round 1. And I remember I was livid with the article because I didn't think it was accurate. I know it wasn't accurate. So dealing with that we started that. So I'm not sure exactly what our win-loss was, but say it was 2-6 in the first 8 weeks. our heads were still spinning. We still had players that were resenting the fact that they'd been labelled as illicit drug takers because it was faceless. It was up to 11 people. And dealing with that in the public forum, let alone with the individual's response to that being in the public forum, that was impossible to focus on high performance and what we needed to do to build as a team. Last year is probably another example off the back of list management and the Do Better report. The culture was being questioned, and we were spending as much time on that as we were on being a better football team, and our results went accordingly. It is so, and we've seen it with Melbourne in the last 3 or 4 weeks. It is so difficult. It's hard enough when everything's going your way to put your attributes together, to put the strengths that you have on at your availability, at your hands, off the field in your staff, and then on the field with your players, to put together a winning combination against a highly competitive teams that you're coming up against. When you've got something that's, you've basically got stones in your shoe. You are not efficient. Everything is, the environment becomes muck because you're dealing with something that's just sitting on your shoulder here that isn't uncleared, which is why, as you said, rightly so, the quicker it's resolved and that a decision is made on a direction, then the sooner Craig McRae, his staff, and the leaders at the football team can actually concentrate back on what they're there to do, which is to be professional footballers and win games of footy. It's a really tough spot to be.
So the path into the club yesterday, so Collingwood is a very exposed environment. So, and there's not a day that goes by that there can't be a camera there for the players walking in.
Funnily enough, when we redeveloped, I bellyached. I said, can we not get security gates? Can we not get an opportunity where we're segmented, where we've literally got 4 walls so we could get in and not be doorstopped? And I used to fight that. In the end, I got the last half of my coach. I said, look, let's just open it up, embrace it, go with it. Don't fight a fight you're not going to win. And that was what 16 and 17 taught me with Robbo, because he's got 24/7 time to think about the next step, the next article, the next angle. I've probably given it I give it 5 minutes in a week. And you're not going to lose. You're not going to win a battle, or you're not going to even be able to stand in that ring and fight with someone in the media who has the capacity to bring another angle, another agenda, like day after day after day. So I let that go. But yes, there's nowhere to hide. And the Collingwood environment is open.
So this is what it sounded like for Taylor Adams, for Jeremy Howe. This is when it really struck me going, so if I'm Jeremy Howe in this instance, I'm full of resentment by the time I walk in the door here. The material impact of it, for as much as footballers say, and don't read the paper, turn this off, turn that off, that's it, right in your face as you walk in. De Goey's not there, so he's not facing it. And if I'm Jeremy Howe, by the time I get to my locker, I'm mad as all hell.
Yeah, because that is a really uncomfortable place to be. It's not what you sign on for. When you're dreaming of playing on the MCG in front of 100,000 people in September with the smell of freshly cut grass, you're not picturing yourself with 8 cameras, 10 microphones, having to tread, and you're not trained to do this either, having to tread the fine line between supporting your teammate, maybe believing that the action itself is not worth what it's now being portrayed as and where it's now got to. And I think it's hard to say, and you've got to try and remove yourself from the grey area. But if what Geordie did in Bali was isolated, I think that it's viewed entirely differently. But he has a history, and that comes into play. So you've got 2 leaders there to try in some way sort of see common sense here and see, well, look, what he did was not great, but it's not a hanging offence. But so I'm trying to defend that. But I'm trying to stand for the club as well. I really don't like the situation we're in. So clearly he's got to be accountable for those decisions and the fact that he's brought us into the future here where we're talking about things other than football. and I've got to train this week, and I've got to train today, and I've just come back from a 3 or 4 day break where I've tried to get some headspace, heart space, spend some time with my loved ones, have a few beers myself and relax and be human. And then I've come back into the club and bang, I'm thrown into this. It's a terrible, if you could choose the opposite of where you want to be, that's where you are. And yeah, there's resentment everywhere. There's resentment for the media, like these people that are here, like sticking the microphones in my face, but they're doing their job. They're instructed to be there and to get this copy. It's a joke. Oh, it's not a joke, but it's just a really bad position to be in.
And that's, yes, and the catalyst is very clear. So I want to explore that with you shortly, the coaching challenge in that, in what you describe as the grey, and where you find the leadership in that, and then the personal accountability as a young man growing up in the sport and what you surround yourself with to avoid the trouble spots along the way, which Jordan De Goey hasn't mastered. And it seems to me that he's remove those people from his circles. What's the leadership challenge here? If you you've lived these scenarios when you're the coach trying to lead a group of young men through a circumstance like this.
Well, the initial leadership challenge is to get your own thoughts in order, is to actually know where you stand. After that, you've got to look at the organisation and where it stands. And then you have to sit with others as they work out, navigate their way through it individually. And then after that, bring it back to what we're all here for, which is to be good at footy. We're not talking about football at the moment. So Craig McRae, as a first-year coach with extensive coaching experience, mind you, and development of individuals, I mean, this is crisis management. It's not, it's not a flat track with optimal possibilities and eventualities being of growth. This is actually just managing the downside as much as you possibly can, and whilst you're doing that, you're trying to go about your normal routine. You're trying to injury prevent. You're recovering. You're getting some load in. Geelong are doing extra load to prepare for finals. I mean, I don't know what Collingwood are doing. I don't know how much time they're spending on it, but they still be doing it. But it's in amongst all of this backdrop of something that they'd rather not be dealing with. And
what risk does that represent to the aspiration, to the mission? Like, this is moving weekend.
Well, it takes so we talk about the footballers are physical. We're all physical beings, and we all have capacities, physical capacities. But the real capacity that counts is your mental and emotional energy that you can bring to your physical form, and then individually you do that, and you come together as a team, and you're performing as a unit against another unit. And when your emotional and mental capacities are dulled, well, then you are dulled. And that is what you get when you are not efficient. I mean, imagine, I don't know what analogy, if you've just got zero resistance on a bike, like you can go forever and you can go hard and you'll perform better. If you dial that up, or you've got a flat tire or two, it's harder to get from here to there, and that's what you're dealing with. It's you got a 50-kilo backpack on you. It's difficult. Everything's harder, and it's a reality for the short term. Trying to work out management challenge is, how do you get that backpack off? How do you park it, for the times that you need to concentrate on footy? And that is difficult, but it can be done. You need to, the purpose for what the players are there for needs to be put front and centre again. And the next step needs to be really clearly defined about this. We're just going to take the next step, because who knows what the 10th one looks like. This is the next step. This is what we've got to do right now to present the best of ourselves, regardless of the backdrop that we're facing.
De Goey's circle of influence, his own personal accountability in this. So he got to the point where clearly there was a lucrative contract on the table for him. So from where he started from a long way back in November, and he conducted himself in a manner where he got himself by the middle of the season into a team that was challenging for finals. He's playing good footy and he's got the lucrative contract in front of him.
Well, I think specifically, I was of the opinion at the beginning of the year that Geordie should just take what Collingwood offers him and repay the faith. And I'm still of that opinion. I suppose in the subtext of that is I feel that Collingwood should not pay top dollar for Jordan De Goey. I think they should offer him what they're prepared to pay him and that he should just accept that and say thank you for your support, for your guidance and understanding as I try and navigate my life to go from being a young man who has made some blues to being a better contributor, a better person, and more contributory to a great environment, not just on the field but off the field. And I still think that if the club chooses to continue with him, I think that should be the parameters that they continue with him on. And I think Geordie should be pretty thankful if that occurs. I think that, and I don't. I said he's a young guy. He's still a young guy, but he's got to make better decisions, and he's got to decide to put people around him that are going to help him make better decisions. I think about my own personal circumstances. Craig Kelly was my manager as a player, coach, and even now. And there's probably once every 2 or 3 years when I might have wanted to do something for me that he just stopped me and said, no, don't do it. And sometimes it might have been taking responsibility for something sort of beyond what I was expected to. But when he did that, I know he could see a worst case scenario that I hadn't imagined or that I had diminished. And he go, no, if this goes bad or if you say this or if you do that or if you want to go and do something here, it's not good for you, it's not good for the club, it's not good for family. And I reckon that happened maybe a handful of times over 20 years, 25 years. And when he gave it to me, I knew I had to sort of think, wow, I better be listening here. So I think you need someone like that in your corner that's going to shine a light on areas that you might not be as cognizant of. And
it would seem that De Goey has pushed that away.
I don't know. His manager, I don't. What I know of his manager is not mainstream.
So it's his brother-in-law,
right? I don't know the guy at all. So it's really hard to comment at all on people that you don't know. I mean, I'd like to think that you deal with people as you meet them, not on reputation, because I know how flawed that can be. And Geordie can't defend at the moment what's going on because he has caused this, and it has come from a history of decisions that have put him in this position, and that's baggage that he's carrying at the moment that he's now transferring onto the club once again.
How serious do you think the Ginnivan Quaynor TikTok is at first blush?
Well, I didn't know about this until about 45 minutes ago when I walked into the studio. So I sent a note to someone, a text to someone that's on TikTok, and I said, "What's going on here?" And the feedback is that it's a hypothetically rating women. And then there's women that are hypothetically rating guys. So this is I don't know, it's not mainstream for me, but it's another one of the latest trends on a very public platform that two young blokes that play for Collingwood have engaged in, and happens to come out and looks like poor attitudes towards women. And probably is if we want to be honest about it, the TikTok trend that is going around at the moment is poor attitudes and stereotypes of women to men and men to women. And in the current environment, it's a story. I don't know where to put it.
No.
It looks bad again, but if you have context and you understand where it's come from, it probably it's diminished in some way, but that's the eye of the beholder as well.
It's puerile nonsense that has no business being in the public domain, but because of the circumstances that are presented, it is used in a particular manner and gives Collingwood another firefront to fight today.
Well, you tell me from the media angle, from the media side, there is. I think that things that are bad get pushed to worse, and things that are good, like get pushed even further. But there is always a bent. Like I think when I watch the news, I mean, there's not a lot of good news stories in the news. Like it's the things that aren't going well, or the things that might be. Like we have this bent towards negative in society and in the communication of information and newsworthy incidents. So that's no different in the sporting environment. So if there is something that can be brought to the table that makes it seem worse than it actually is, it's not going to be left on the sidelines. It's going to be brought into the story. And I think this is an example of that.
And it is a video that had been deleted by now as well. So it's been retrieved somehow or another. So it was up on TikTok for a period of time, but it has been deleted.
Do we know when it was deleted?
No, I don't. I'm a bit like you, is TikTok is not my long suit.
Oh, and there's a few people here that are sending some stuff through around, surely the players are trained, surely they can handle this, surely there's mechanisms that the club is responsible for, that the AFL are responsible for. I understand all of that, and I would sit from the outside in and say, surely you know better than to do A, B, or C. And yes, they are. But the reality is that you don't live in a vacuum. You are part of society. These guys, these young footballers, young men, are part of society, and they swim in the same soup that we all swim in. They're held to a higher standard and accountability than guys their age in other professions, and they're human. And they're trying to navigate that. They're trying to work, and generally it's done in a very respectful way. When that line is crossed, well, then you're accountable like everyone else. But when you do cross that line, your failings and your vulnerabilities and your shortcomings are brought to bear and laid bare for everyone to speculate and to pick apart. That's not something that anyone is really trained for. And but it is something that you understand, that you sign on for when you live a public existence.
So the last two are the first. The notion that De Goey could be hot property to be recruited elsewhere, top dollar, big contract in the manner that was being spoken about as a free agent, and whether this has any impact on that. So I'm on the extreme end. I think he's unrecruitable to another club in that circumstance. There's a difference between being free to a good home.
Yeah.
But the circumstances that are being depicted at the moment.
I'm going to come back at you, so that it's not just Geordie and it's not just Collingwood.
Yeah.
So talk to me about Bailey Smith and Jordan De Goey. Now, I'm not saying that we're assuming the relationship with Collingwood and De Goey is strained and may break. We're not suggesting that with Bulldogs and Bailey Smith, are we?
It feels more pastoral in the Bulldogs instance, that he has had a troubled period where the Bulldogs have been there with him.
Yes.
Helped him through it. And then he wears his public punishment for... So
Geordie's positioned as a pattern of behaviour and a recidivist.
Over a long period of time.
And Bailey Smith's is more an event or a period of time. But we believe that is behind him, and that he is going to learn from this and be better in that space.
That would be the hope.
But that's the feeling, the general feeling, isn't it? And no one's really feeling that about Geordie at the moment.
No,
at all.
His flaws are well exposed, and the most recent incident is not a week old. So for whatever...
How did we feel?
He looks like he's slow to learn.
And that's clearly evident by the way that his communication post the video coming out. So in round 8 or 9, after the issue in New York, were his stocks a little bit better in round 8 or 9 than they were 6 months earlier?
Yes, I would imagine so. That was never my view, though.
No.
My view was that he had risk written all over him if you go and bring him in as your highest paid player on the longest tenure.
And the way you described it at the beginning of the show was clear, and that is definitely not an outcome that would be entertained, I would have thought, by St Kilda for want of, to pick a club.
It's terribly unfair that they're the ones, but they appear to be the ones.
But I think that Jordan De Goey is a very good footballer. and he probably hasn't reached the heights on field that a lot of people had placed on him. But that doesn't mean that he hasn't grown and developed, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. We're seeing more consistent football. But when you talk about recruiting players, we talk about character all the time, and we talk about what you're bringing to the organisation. We talk about how you're making the team and the club better. It's a very holistic outcome or consideration now. And there's no doubt that when no club wants to be in the situation that Collingwood are in at the moment. And if you've got individuals that are going to bring that to bear, you're probably going to avoid that, aren't you? Well, I know I don't want to be in that situation.
Yep. And the last one, so how does it resolve today, do you think?
Well, the conversations internally will be interesting because there's the playing group and how they feel about it. And there's really strong leadership. I feel for Taylor Adams and Jeremy Howe in particular, and Scott Pendlebury, who have done so much. If you talk about pastoral care, there's been so much pastoral care, not just for Geordie, but for the whole playing list. And I feel for these guys because these guys have grown, have taken, they're older than Geordie and they're older than some of the younger boys and even sort of Jack and Isaac in this situation. But, I feel for them that they've got some hard yards to do here, some tough love to dish out. The coach and the coaching staff and the rest of the football program that have got to make decisions based on what are we going to do now. We've got to keep this momentum going in our season somehow in amongst all of this. Then there's the board working out what it's accountable and responsible for, how much trust it puts in the football department or the CEO and the admin to be able to manage this, and how much it feels it needs to come over the top to make a stand about personnel and what is acceptable or not in its environment. All of those discussions are taking place at the moment. Now they're not 5-minute chats.
Yep.
It takes time, and it's going to get in the way of what would normally be the flow of a week to go and prepare to play a game of footy this week, which, when you boil it down, is the senior coach's responsibility to prepare the team to play footy as well as you possibly can every weekend, and that he's doing that with